Chapter 19. Adian. The Price of a Life. It was done. It had taken a horrifically short amount of time, but Adian felt as if he had aged centuries. He looked up as he wiped the spittle from his lips and stared at the 10 humanoid monsters that were arrayed like a ghastly honor guard behind Tega. It was a sight born out of a nightmare. The dungeon-bound sadistic smile had only grown wider as he had watched his brother rend his own soul again and again and again. He continued to watch and grin as Dre dry-heaved on his hands and knees. Asya watched Dre as well, her expression a battlefield of confused emotions. Her eyes somehow managed to release more tears that splashed onto the already damp floor in front of her. Her injuries looked painful, but it was obvious that the majority of her tears were for Dre. Adian's attention was drawn to Tega, as the dungeon-bound slowly clapped. The sound echoed like thunder in the otherwise silent cavern. "Well done, Dre. You have proven that you are the same as me. You are willing to do what is needed, regardless of the moral ramifications." He smiled a knowing smile. "I'm aware that you don't understand right now, but I hope that in the future I receive thanks for what I have done for you today." Adian gawked at Tega in disbelief, but Dre didn't even lift his head in response. Tega looked up, and for the first time in a long while he seemed to notice the army of creatures surrounding them. "Alas, it is time for you and Asya to go. This break has been a beneficial diversion, but now I must continue with my work. I will let my newest converts escort you out." As he finished speaking, the defiled humans sprang simultaneously into motion. They encircled Asya and Dre, but quite obviously did not include Adian in their attention. Tega, however, turned towards him, a hungry sneer splitting his lips. It was at precisely that moment that Adian realized that he had completely missed a rather important detail. Tega had promised to let Asya and Dre go, which, against all odds, he actually appeared willing to do, but Tega had never made any such promise to him. Goosebumps sprouted on Adian's arms. His hands grew clammy. His chest tightened, and he could feel sweat trickling down his back. He didn't want to ask. He wasn't going to like the answer. Even still, he cleared his throat, and with only a slight waver in his voice, asked, "What about me?" Tega adopted an exaggeratedly thoughtful expression as he stroked a beard of close-cropped moss. Yes. There is one troublesome loose end left, or perhaps I should say an unresolved note." Tega chuckled at his own joke. Adian did not. "What would be a fitting response for such a troublesome bard?" he asked, but the smile on his face made it clear that he had already concocted something nefarious. "Perhaps your little adventure should end much as it began. For the sake of closure, of course." Tega made a beckoning gesture, followed immediately by the sound of thousands of tiny feet scratching against the stone floor. None of the other creatures moved. They didn't need to. The rat gore simply scurried beneath, around, or in some cases over top of them. They came until 100 surrounded them, then 1,000, then tens of thousands. They filled every gap, climbed on top of each other. The floor was a sea of patchy fur and glowing eyes. They filled Adian's vision and mind, until he could think of nothing but the slow and horrible death of being suffocated under the writhing mass of them. He may have stayed like that, frozen in terror, forever. But Tega spoke. His words drew Adian out of his imagination and back into a living nightmare. "They say that death by rat gore is one of the most painful imaginable. Their jaws aren't large enough for killing bites, you see, and their claws are too small for anything more than shallow cuts. I've heard that their victims usually die from blood loss, but not until thousands of individually insignificant wounds have been inflicted. You may have seen the beginnings of that, actually, with the fool farm wife and her idiot of a husband. They probably survived, though. Their wounds weren't quite so plentiful, and Noralee has always been good at what she does, even if she is a petulant shrew of a woman." Adian tried to think as Tega monologued. He had no instruments and no weapons. He had given those to Dre. Even if he had them, though, fighting was useless. There wasn't a logical solution to his predicament. It was a completely hopeless situation, which meant that there was only one way, one singular way, that he survived this. He closed his eyes, lifted his head, and spoke, with only the hint of a whisper fueling his words. "Why is this happening? Why did so many people have to die? Why didn't you provide a way out for Dre? Why? I don't understand. But even so, I choose to trust you. If this is where I die, how I die, then so be it. I'll die confused and angry, but still your loyal servant. However, if you still have a use for me, then show me a way out, because I can't find one on my own. Help me. Please, help me." "Your prayers can't help you here, Bard." Tega's voice was far too close. Adian opened his eyes, only for the entirety of his vision to be filled by the dungeon-bound's monstrous visage. "Not while you reside in hell, not while you are in the clutches of a devil. I have the power here, the power to take lives, the power to create them anew. Within my dungeon, I am a god, the only god." That's when an idea hit Adian in a wave of divine inspiration. He had to forcibly stop himself from audibly gasping at the revelation. Tega had a weakness, an obvious weakness, one that he might just be able to exploit. "The time has come for the judgment I predetermined. I declare Before Tega could finish his command, Adian cut in as nonchalant a voice as he could manage. "Seems like a bit of a waste." Tega hesitated. "What?" "What's a waste?" "Well, it's just as you said. I cannot deny it. For all intents and purposes, you are a god here. Your wish is the command of a numberless horde. You can resurrect the dead and claim them as your own. You are 2 heads higher than the tallest man I have ever seen. Your plans have easily outwitted all those who contend against you. You are exhaustingly impressive. Even though I despise you, I can't deny it." Tega chuckled, deep in his chest, and the sound echoed off the stone walls like thunder. "Your words are obsequious, but their implications are disparaging. Do you really think that cheap flattery can save you?" Adian stopped himself from answering too eagerly. Even his hope began to burn in his chest. Tega engaging in conversation meant that he might just have a chance. "Well, like you said, I am a bard." Even with the terror of his situation bearing down on him, he still had to cough to clear his throat of the bile that automatically rose at the words. "And using songs to spread the news of powerful beings, good or evil, runs in my veins. You are past the point of requiring secrecy, as is evidenced not only by the vast power you have displayed, but also by your mercy in allowing Dre and Asya to leave. If you don't need to keep yourself a secret, why not allow me to write songs about your terrible might, to spread your fame across the land? I could call you Tega the Terrible, or the Vicious Durak, or whatever you would prefer, really. It is currently assumed that the dungeon bound of this place is a boy named Dexter. An odd boy, perhaps a creepy one, but I'm sure that he couldn't hold a candle to you. Will you allow someone else to steal the credit for your impressive accolades?" "People think that pathetic child controls this place? He was getting a little too close to the truth, a little too soon." Tega gave Adian a frustrated glare. "Not unlike you, Bard. This Dexter, however, was at least smart enough to run away." Tega opened his mouth to continue, but then hesitated. His glare grew even sharper. "I am aware that this is simply a desperate ploy to save your own skin. But, even still, I admit that I find the idea enticing. But why should I trust that you will actually sing this song and spread my fame?" Countless lies raced through Adian's mind before he landed on something close enough to the truth to be believable. "Honestly, the more I sing your song, the more people become aware of the danger." He hesitated, but then decided to gamble with his words. "Perhaps it will even draw the attention of people high-level enough to stop you." Tega's face contorted in anger, but then melted into a sickly smile. "A refreshingly truthful answer, but an uneducated one. I am far past the point of stopping. Slowing, though." It is possible that I could be slowed, but is it worth the risk? If this song draws in powerful people and I manage to kill them before they escape, my growth could dramatically escalate." By the end of his words, Tega was little more than mumbling. He realized it, though, gave a cough, and started to speak clearly again. "All right. I believe that you would sing such a song. Now there is but one question. Are you worthy of such an opportunity?" Adian steeled his nerves as he replied, "I could sing you one of my songs to prove my worth." Tega frowned. "No, you will write my song now." Adian felt the little confidence that had grown within him fade away. "Now? Yes. You will not leave this place unless I am satisfied with it." Adian coughed and swallowed hard. Creativity is a fickle mistress. Have you not heard the saying that true art cannot be rushed? Perhaps you could just kill you now and find another less particular bard to write my song?" Tega butted in, his smile venomous. Adian took a deep breath. "No, there is no need for that. Dre, could you retrieve my guitar?" Dre walked towards the Pac-Man as he looked up and wiped filth from his mouth. He glanced at Tega, but then slowly removed the guitar from his pack and handed it to Adian, who slipped the strap over his shoulder and began tuning the instrument as his mind raced. Here he was, tuning his guitar in the deepest depths of a dungeon, in front of a dungeon-bound and thousands of its enslaved diseased creatures whose stench filled his nostrils to the point of gagging, mere feet away from where 10 souls had been perverted into monstrosities. And now he was supposed to spontaneously write a song? One that was good enough to convince a narcissistic psychopath who had literally sold his soul for power to let him live? If he wasn't so terrified, then he might have laughed at the absurdity of the situation. He began plucking out an eerie tune on the strings of his guitar. It was a note progression that he had been playing around with for years, but had never found words for. As he played and racked his brain, still no words came to him. Just before he started to panic, he looked up at Tega, truly looked at him, and was filled with terror and awe anew. That's when the words came. He began to half whisper and half sing. "Moss is growing from his flesh, eyes bright emerald green." His vocals paused for a few heartbeats until he let his eyes wander to the monsters all around him. "Both man and beast he does oppress, twists them till they're obscene." He paused again, and was simultaneously gratified and revolted by the smile twisting Tega's lips. "Stealth and wits he does possess, his powers grow unseen." In a flash of inspiration, Adian knew what the next line had to be. You couldn't have a proper horror song without scaring children and parents alike, after all. "Mothers, fathers do distress, he'll steal children for they wean." Adian then began to strum, still using minor chords, but moving up the scale. His voice had slowly been increasing in volume, but now he sang out with assertiveness and power, like a steward announcing his king. "You haven't heard his name before, but soon it will be spread through lore. His steps, they shake the very ground, the only truly dungeon-bound." By the end of the chorus, Tega was smiling broadly, and for the first time, there was not a hint of malice in his expression. It was a sight that Adian was sure would haunt the nightmares of whatever life he had left to live. Yes, something like that would do quite nicely. Ugh. A pained moan brought Adian's attention back to Asya. The young woman hurriedly covered her mouth to quickly mute herself, but the agonized expression on her face spoke even louder than her outburst had. Adian internally reprimanded himself. He had to get her out of here, and to a healer as soon as possible, or she wasn't going to make it. He looked at Tega, who stared at Asya with apparent indifference, and had an idea. Is it entirely necessary that they stay? Adian said, adding what he hoped came across as slight pompousness to his tone. The art of songwriting cannot bear distraction. Tega's eyes flashed with anger at Adian's presumptuous comment, but with a flick of his hand, his defiled human sprang into motion. In mere moments, after a short flurry of activity as the horde shifted, where Adian was barely able to exchange concerned looks with Dre, the young man was escorted out of the cavernous cathedral of stone through a tunnel of corrupted creatures, Asya cradled gently in his arms. Adian began plucking the same eerie tune as he watched them go. He kept his expression neutral, even though the sight of them leaving lifted a huge burden off of his weary soul. As he turned his attention back to Tega, all he could do was pray that he would soon be following in their footsteps. Hopefully with eyes that didn't glow emerald's green.